I mean, you get nervous here and there when it's going, I don't want to say easy, but when the score is in your favor, it's like you have to be cautious. So a little bit nervous, but obviously I'm super happy to be here.
Those 10,000 Filipino fans didn't come to Miami just to watch a tennis match. They came to be part of something larger than the scoreline. And without ever picking up a racket, they did something no one inside that stadium anticipated. Karolina Muchova arrived at Hard Rock Stadium's grandstand court riding serious momentum, fresh off a Qatar Open title just weeks prior. On paper, the matchup told a clear story: world number 14 versus world number 29. Seasoned champion versus emerging talent. Czech precision versus Filipino heart. She had dismantled Eala 6-0, 6-2 in exactly 1 hour. A result clinical enough to crush any ordinary crowd's spirit. But this was no ordinary crowd. What unfolded after that final point? Machova standing courtside, racket in hand, surrounded by thousands of heartbroken yet still roaring Filipino supporters, moved her in a way she clearly hadn't anticipated when she walked out to warm up. In her post-match interview, she couldn't conceal it. Eala had already been defeated. But somehow, her fans had claimed something. If moments like this fascinate you, stick around, because this is exactly the kind of angle worth exploring. So, what did 10,000 Filipino fans actually do that affected Machova so deeply? Start with her own words, because they reveal everything about the emotional weight of that environment. It's honestly not that easy. Even when you keep winning points, you still have thoughts that you have to keep focused, keep pressuring the other player. All that. Read that carefully. This is a player who just posted a 6-0, 6-2 victory. She didn't drop a single service game. She converted all 5 break points she created. She struck 20 winners against just 11 unforced errors. By any statistical measure, it was one of the most controlled performances of her season. And yet, she stood there telling a Tennis Channel interviewer that it wasn't easy. The reason wasn't her opponent. It was the stands. Here's what separated this crowd from virtually every other tennis fanbase in the sport right now. Most partisan supporters go quiet when their player gets bageled in 22 minutes. The body language shifts. The faces drop. A familiar, uncomfortable silence settles in. Not these fans. When Eala dropped the first set without winning a single game, the Filipino supporters didn't flinch. When Machova broke early in the second and sprinted to a 4-0 lead, threatening a double bagel that would have been Eala's first in 4 years, the chants kept coming. Alex. Fight Alex. Over and over, from a grandstand packed with Philippine flags, fan club banners, and supporters who had traveled to Miami specifically to be in that building. When Eala finally held serve to get on the board at 4-1, her reaction said everything, a roar that came from somewhere deep. The crowd erupted alongside her. For a brief moment, the atmosphere felt less like a consolation game and more like a Grand Slam title breakthrough. That is the force those fans generated inside that arena. And Machova absorbed every bit of it. She later acknowledged that even while winning comfortably, she had to keep pulling her focus back, reminding herself to maintain pressure, stay sharp, not let the noise disrupt her rhythm. For a 2023 French Open finalist and 2-time US Open semifinalist to be mentally managing crowd energy while cruising to a straightforward victory says something profound about what those Filipino supporters poured into that court. To fully appreciate why this moment landed the way it did for Machova, you first have to understand who Alex Eala actually is to the Philippine sporting community and what she represents beyond the rankings.
Alex Eala takes center stage at the BNP Paribas Tennis Paradise in Indian Wells.
It's been packed for players like Alex Eala, Joao Fonseca, seeing the Filipino fans.
Eala is 20 years old. She grew up in Quezon City, left for Spain at 13 to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy, and spent years building her game in relative quiet while an entire nation waited for something to believe in. The Philippines runs on basketball and boxing. Tennis was a footnote. Tennis didn't make global stars. Then Eala walked into the 2025 Miami Open as a wild card ranked 140th in the world and eliminated 3 Grand Slam champions back-to-back in straight sets. Ostapenko, Keys, Pegula, She reached the semifinals as the first Filipino in WTA 1000 history to do so. That run didn't just transform her ranking. It transformed a nation's relationship with the sport. By the 2026 Miami Open, she had climbed to a career-high number 29. And her fanbase had evolved into something the WTA had genuinely never encountered before. At the Australian Open just 2 months earlier, spectators packed her court to capacity and hundreds were turned away at the gate. Her opponent, Alicia Parks, openly admitted the atmosphere rattled her so badly she dropped the first set 6-0. Broadcast commentators, tennis forums, and fellow players all landed on the same description. Wherever Eala played, her Filipino supporters turned neutral venues into home courts. Miami was different only in scale. Hard Rock Stadium could actually hold them. And the Filipino-American community in South Florida, one of the largest in the country, arrived in numbers that made the evening feel less like a sporting event and more like a national gathering. Then came the turn that specifically reached Machova. Eala lost, and lost badly. Philippine sports media had already coined a name for it, the Czech curse. 13 matches against Czech opponents since turning professional in 2020. 0 wins. Not one. And this wasn't a narrow defeat that could be contextualized away. It was a masterclass, a performance where the experience gap and tactical gap were simply too wide to bridge on that particular evening. Eala didn't deflect. In her post-match press conference, she was composed and clear. She hadn't played her best, but a significant part of that was how well Machova performed. She identified things she could have handled differently. No mention of the injury wrap on her left thigh. No excuses. Just honest self-assessment from a 20-year-old who had just been dismantled on the same court where she'd made history 12 months earlier. Then she addressed her supporters in Tagalog. The translation: she remained happy, not disappointed. She thanked her fellow Filipinos. The fight, she said, continues, and she hoped to see them again in Europe. That message, delivered minutes after a 6-0, 6-2 defeat, landed differently than you might expect. No boozed and visible frustration. Instead, sustained applause that reportedly continued long after she had left the court. That is the precise moment the story stopped being about a tennis result. Machova was still on court. She heard all of it. To be accurate here, because this story deserves precision over drama, Machova did not break down at the net. What happened was quieter, and in many ways more revealing. In her on-court interview immediately after the match, she visibly struggled to put the experience into words. She described feeling nervous despite winning convincingly. She spoke about how difficult it was to maintain focus inside an emotional environment that intense. And when she acknowledged the crowd, the Filipino fans who had just watched their player lose and were still there, still present, still pouring warmth into the building, something shifted visibly in her composure. This is not a player who hides her emotions. At the 2025 US Open, she was visibly moved mid-match after spotting her ex-boyfriend in the stands. So when a crowd that wasn't even cheering for her, one that had just absorbed a painful defeat, produced that kind of response in her, it said something meaningful about the energy those supporters carry with them. There's a specific kind of sportsmanship that sits above rivalry. Backing your player through a humiliating scoreline without bitterness, without ugliness, without making the atmosphere uncomfortable for anyone, and then sustaining that grace after the final point. That is genuinely rare. Machova recognized it in real time, and it got to her. The implications stretch well beyond this one match. Eala heads into her clay season at the Linz Open in Austria from April 6th, a WTA 500 event and her first at that level on clay. The ranking hit from Miami is real. She loses roughly 270 points and slides from number 29 toward the mid-40s, unable to defend the 390 points earned from last year's semi-final run. But the cultural momentum is moving in the opposite direction entirely. The WTA officially launched the Philippine Women's Open in January 2026, the country's first WTA tournament, driven directly by the wave of interest Eala created. Tickets to the final sold out before she had even confirmed her entry. Coco Gauff, after defeating Eala in Dubai earlier this year, directly acknowledged the pro-Eala crowd following their match. Opponents are paying attention. Tournament directors are paying attention. The WTA itself is paying attention. Those 10,000 fans in Miami didn't just support their player through a loss. They showed one of the best players in the world what unconditional sporting loyalty actually looks like in its purest form. Machova won the match. The fans won something else entirely. And the player standing on the other side of that net couldn't pretend she hadn't felt it. Eala lost 60 minutes of tennis. But she left Miami carrying something no ranking point reflects, the proof that her supporters have become a genuine force that the entire tennis world is now watching. And that force made Machova cry. That's exactly why moments like this are worth slowing down for. The scoreline only ever tells you half the story.